So thank you to all the ARC Marathon, Simona, Luca, Daniela, Edonela, Cristina. And so we as juries also have to present our work. So I'm the first one. So I would try to explain in 15 minutes all what we do at the office, condensed work, experimentation, etc. So this is Mexico City. How do I explain what I do? I see buildings as knowledge structures, and as such, the territories connected and defined through architectural design are spaces for the interpretation of knowledge, as well as places of collective memory and understanding. An image of the studio. As a practitioner, I explore how architectural forms set meaningful structures in place. As a researcher, I reflect upon the syntax, context, text, and subtexts. Design-wise, I'm mostly interested in place-making by rediscovering the frames that connect us. In what follows, I will show my work under three main categories: art, representation, and action; materiality, habitability, and experimentation; public space, community, and mobility. Representation in architecture is a medium of conveying meaningful narratives of space, but also of resignifying our connections to space. Therefore, the literature we produce in my studio is integral to the design process and inseparable from the translation of our ideas into concrete forms. Our most recent book, Common Space in Social Housing Units, published as part of our piece Stand Ground in this Venice Biennale edition, reworks typographical arrangements and the post-it formats as a methodology. The pink post-its are the support for graphic aphorisms paired to maximums which concisely convey a series of observations and design solutions for public space development. The aim of this pink handbook is compiling a series of principles and effective tactics that free and activate a process of placemaking. Our project in the Venice Biennale, Stand Ground, invited people to imagine a placemaking process standing by the following principles of our design manifesto: seek content in context, change barriers into boundaries, shift spatial perception, approach the landscape as the program, resignify materials, work with temporality, hold beauty as a basic right. We paved the exhibition floor with a one-to-one reproduction of the Arsenal wall in recycled Venetian brick. On the original wall, a screen projected in real time the activity of the public space behind the barrier. The reinterpretation of the wall as common ground communicated public space with private space. The barrier became a boundary. On the one hand, Stand Ground creates a fluid space which allows playful communication between the exhibit and the city. On the other, the intermediate nature of the piece deconstructs the simulacra and illusions of freedom in our current society, which lives vicariously in virtual spaces under constant surveillance. The interface is really a way to postpone the present. We often reflect on temporality, which regards to build space, so as much as we explore the past and the present. We like the utopian exercise that launches us into the future. Zoom. This playful exercise is a tiny plan codex which projects a library for the year 2050. And the library space, in light of nanotechnological advancement, becomes as complex as a computer chip and as minimum as the bacterial genetic code. So it is no longer a built-out space, but a built-in space within the body, which literally encodes all the knowledge of the world at our fingertips. So we here play with scales and layers, and it doesn't matter if it's at sight with the city inside, or it's your fingertip with a chip that allows you to have all the knowledge from past, present, and future. Of course, reflecting on the future means thinking about time itself. This water table is our version of a modern oracle. It projects on its surface the patterns that result from different vibration algorithms. Through resonance, the table engages different bodies of water and bird sounds, including us and the Earth as a whole. As frequency expanded in water, it becomes apparent how the past will be what the future has been. Without water, there is no time. So the present is clearly the result of our echoes and projections about water as a source of life. In terms of representation, we achieve our visual metaphors through a play on scale and layers that prove new ways of looking at the architectural object. Our models involve the viewer's active gaze and imaginative capabilities. For instance, we presented this optic art piece as a model of how city life works, with landmarks magnifying and condensing flux and exchange around themselves. We often reflect on the design tools which architecture implements as a discipline. Also, in the studio, the building process is integral to the building object. So we think of the architectural object in multiple layers of materialization. And what we've discovered is that working with people's assumptions and perception of space is already a way of building. In these urban actions, we use something as simple as chalk strokes or scotch tape lines to organize the use of space. Site actions are a characteristic signature of our work. They are very low-cost interventions that involve people with their space in a ludic, innovative way. Their purpose is to introduce change in community, inertias by shifting people's perception of space. Placemaking is about building processes which enable meaningful connections between spaces and people. Boyd Temple is one of the 7 landmarks in the landscape along the route of a 200-year-old pilgrimage, which annually goes across the western highlands of Mexico. Approximately 1 million people travel by foot 117 kilometers around springtime. So this white concrete wall forming a 40-meter diameter circle is a land art piece placed amidst pine woods that blend in with the particular topography of the site. In our research, we realized the sense of timelessness evoked by historical circles of stone is due to the fact that their form is not bound to any specific vital function, except, perhaps, the vital one of building significant relationships. Whatever their intent, these spaces were active by the bonds and exchange which set them in place. When architecture takes for granted the social ground which makes it happen, it forgets its vital effect to build relationships. Relationships are the primary shelter of any society. Without them, proper shelter cannot exist. Habitability is the capacity of space to welcome and engage people in everyday routines. There are 2 important aspects in habitability. The first is material congruence. Contrary to what people think, brick and mortar can add texture to life when they promote a meaningful relationship between landscape and social environment. And second, experimentation with building formats. When architectural expressions strive for affordable material simplicity, they open new ways of inhabiting a territory. Detailed care of materiality meets with congruence the identity of a place. In this private week home in Tepoztlán, 2 hours away from Mexico City, we use local construction materials to modulate different environments throughout the house. The main challenge was giving a sense of amplitude and variation in a rather small terrain so that each space offers something singular. The extraordinary craftsmanship in the use of vernacular stones connects the house to the lands, pre-Columbian past, and the soil layers of the Mexican territory. Materiality is not solely about form or function, but about meaningful placing our daily habits. This next project is, and Francisco Pardo here has also done one project in Oquilan. This was a pro bono project done because of the devastating earthquakes of September 2017 in Mexico, and provided an opportunity to recover a more materially sensible approach to construction. So this pro bono house in Oquilan, the state of Mexico, for a single mother of 2 children who lost her home in the earthquake, resignified local construction practices and adapted them to maximum budgetary constraints. One of the main assets has been Caleb being so proud of his new home. The added value of the structure is that it provides means to lift a family out of poverty and facilitates community networks. Although a small house, the prototype makes a feasible, replicable solution in the larger scale. Traditional can be modern, vernacular can be innovative, local solutions can be exported. Habitability involves recolonizing workspaces with a more integral approach to life. For instance, we recently designed and built 17 incinerating stations which house the furnaces for solid waste combustion in Mexican national airports and ports. The term station evokes the replicability and tidiness of an exportable space lab, which would adapt to a wide range of extreme climates and the logistical movement around a train station. Some of these stations actually seem to have landed in alien or post-apocalyptic landscapes. Our prototype deployed the operator's program in a circular plan and assembled the station with ready-made parts made from a unique type of folded concrete that is durable, malleable, and requires nearly no maintenance. Besides making tasks orderly, it radically transformed the way these facilities used to operate. The station becomes an inhabitable machine that houses an agreeable workspace as much as it creates a meaningful relationship between the operator and his work. In Mexico City, houses complexes are massive. 25% of the Mexican population lives in housing units. They are cities in their own right. This is the project Common Unity. It's a public space rehabilitation project of a social housing unit in Mexico City. This is how we found the site. So we work around the physical barriers created by the residents in common areas to make them permeable, democratic, and meaningful. Everything was gated when we arrived, and by taking a place-making approach, we transformed the alienated sectors of the housing complex into a community of barrios. Through participatory planning, our design strategies substitute dividing vertical structures for sheltering horizontal ones. We implemented roof model equipped for diverse programs. The new design spoke for itself. Residents agreed to remove 90% of the barriers, and the recovered public space became an extension of each apartment. The new space facilitated a different kind of ownership and appropriation, one that habituates inhabitants to work for the common good. Although 70% of what gets built in Mexico is housing, around 50 to 20% of it is regularly abandoned. Developments result in lifeless dormitory blocks whose social depression factors significantly in the real estate value of property. By activating public space effectively in housing blocks, we would be enabling a grassroots culture to emerge and shape community towards economic development. So for this next project, this is how we found it also. It's a suburban townhouse complex near the port of Veracruz. The developer literally told us to build just a roof to protect the basketball court from the sun, heat, and rain. Nobody used it because it's very hot in Veracruz, and so it was all day empty. There were no trees, there was no vegetation. And so with a little more than the original budget, we designed instead a sports court that houses an entire community center. The portico is more than a roof. It generates a new habitat with a variety activity program. So what we did is instead of putting just a roof with very big columns, we put very thin columns, and in between, we put all the program. So it has bathrooms, it has a library, it has a computer room, it has swings, it has games, it has hammocks, it has two floors, so it became an entirely community center. When the developer realized the positive social impact that the place had on his housing venture, he invited a biologist working in the natural reserve nearby to set up a herbal medicinal clinic with a small botanical garden where the community will be taught the benefits of local medicinal plants. So we went from urban sprawl and cultural desert to a hub for ecological awareness and biodiversity preservation solely by designing a program which sustains a vision of place. By performing as infrastructure, architecture gives back to the public realm, and its visible effect is in the way it mitigates violence and heals the social fabric. This next project, this is how we also found this place, was done for one of the most violence-ridden territories in Mexico, Zacatecas. So we recycle a paved sewage canal dividing a housing unit and transform it into a playground. So as you can see before, there was a bridge that was a barrier that you could not cross, and you could not cross on this side. And when you wanted to go down, you had to go down and then go up. And then if you have a wheelchair or if you have a stroller, then you cannot cross. There was no vegetation, nobody was playing there. So we decided to put this bridge so you can cross underneath. You have games underneath also. And so this new transitional space offers a safe recreational area which particularly welcome groups in risk situations. We made universally accessible bridge that open an esplanade underneath. So on the slopes, we put all type of slides and stairs as games, and rebuild the canal slopes as a resting area, agora steps, and climbing walls. The playground transformed an urban scar into an attractive horizon. The cityscape became the program. So what has happened in Mexico? Constructing millions of homes far from city centers has generated a serious problems of inequality because of mobility. In Mexico City, people spend on average 2 to 3 hours daily in commuting and close to 30% of their income in transportation. The less money people have, the more time they give up. People throw away life getting places. So the last project I present is called Metropolis. And we found this was an exercise very interesting because they asked us in a magazine to do an urban project, but to recycle something. So we went out and took pictures of the city. We wanted to do this idea of vertical public space. And when we came back to the office, one collaborator showed his photos, and he had one of these buildings. And then another one showed his photos, and he had another image that had the same building. So we started thinking, well, there are more than 2 buildings. And we started doing our research, and there were not only 2, there were 22 identical buildings with an iconic facade. And so this project recycles 22 buildings in 16 stations connected to the subway network. It enhances the urban transportation system as a network of networks. The iconic facade of these buildings make them ideal for multi-service centers. Some of them are derelict or underused buildings. So what if we articulate them and generate an underground loop of entertainment, arts, sports, commerce, health, in which the services meet the user's transportation routines? The playful program of each building recovers a historical sense of place from the subway station name where they are located. The program's archaeology of the name interconnects the roots of our historic subsoil. Densification of urban economic activity shortens home work distances, allows people to spend more time on family, health, and education. In some, it capitalizes on sustainable pedestrian environments and transit mobility, which avoid urban sprawl. So to conclude, megacities like mine daily raise important questions. In a world of limited time and resources, what is absolutely urgent and necessary to design? What type of architecture can we sustain worldwide? How can we solve important issues with the minimum possible infrastructure? So I think that part of the solution is architecture as placemaking. Thank you very much.